Every time you record a macro, you create a small program using VBA, Visual Basic for Applications, the programming language of macros. And the big question in many of your minds would be, what is VBA and what do you really need to know about this programming language? In this particular workbook called Code, notice its file extension XLSM, there are macros here. On the View tab in the ribbon, rightmost button, Macros, View Macros. There are a few macros in this workbook. We might want to see what the macro code is about. I recommend that anytime you record a macro that you quickly look at the code. It's not that you need to know a whole lot about this environment, but you'll learn more and more about macros as you view the VBA code. And certainly one method is to select a macro in question, like this particular one here, highlight value cells. And in this dialog box, click Edit. There we are. This is a macro created in a prior movie that highlights just the value cells within a given worksheet. And the big concern, of course, is what do we need to know about what we're seeing here? And what is this environment all about? We're on a different screen completely. When this macro was recorded, the initial step involved clicking the menu and choosing, by clicking 4 different places, a command process. And all that translates into this. When you view macro code, you're viewing an environment that begins with the word sub. It's sort of out of the past, means subroutine. It ends with the phrase end sub. These are automatically generated. When you provide the name of the macro, that's what's provided in the very first line. If you provide a keystroke shortcut at the time of creation, you will see that here. Don't expect to be changing this and have any real effect. This doesn't change anything. Don't even think of changing that there. That's not how we change the keystroke shortcut. These lines here all begin with a single quote. Those are considered comments. If we remove them, the macro runs exactly the same. This has nothing to do with the operation of the macro, but it is good documentation. Many times I will remove this one. It's simply a repeat of the top line, so it doesn't hurt to get rid of it. And you can casually do that or keep it. Doesn't make any difference. Press delete. You can introduce empty lines if you think it makes the reading of this clearer to you. I'm going to click right here and press enter. I might click down here and press enter. Totally unnecessary, but on the other hand, if it somehow clarifies what I think this macro is doing, fine. And at different times, we will see code like this. And of course, aren't you glad you never had to type something like that? And you can more or less figure out what's going on in here. Although, again, the focus is not so much on mastering the code, but getting familiar with it and not getting intimidated by it. And anytime we want to leave this environment, we can press Alt F11, as I'm doing here. In fact, you can use Alt F11 as a toggle. In any workbook that has macros, say this one, we can press Alt F11 to take us into the world of Visual Basic, do what we want to do here, or maybe just look around, press Alt F11, and we're automatically back into Excel. So we're getting you used to the idea that every macro automatically generates a small program in Visual Basic. You want to check it out, get a little familiar with it as we learn more about this environment. This is not a course in VBA, and yet you cannot ignore that feature of the software. It's a programming environment easily accessible from any workbook.